Welcome to T.time on Design for Sustainability. Sustainable design may seem like a modern concept, but its roots run deep and its evolution is rich with insight. Whether you're curious about its development or simply seeking background on sustainable design practices, we invite you to explore our podcast series. The series is inspired by the book Design for Sustainability, a multi-level framework from products to social technical systems by Fabrizio Ceskin from Brunel Design School UK and Idil Gaziolusoy from Aalto University, Finland. Endorsed by the international networks Lens, Cumulus Association and DESIS, this podcast initiative has been developed and organized by Paranel Federal University and Institute Brazil and Design, the Sustainable Design School in France.
So nowadays I'm studying feminist theories and how we can articulate that with design. So I work in the research line of design theory and history. So I'm trying to understand how these theories might inform our methodologies, our ways of looking at things. And I think that concerning the social dimension of design for sustainability, gender studies is an interesting point to assess some of these dynamics. And so I changed, I made a quite big change in my research focus, but I tend to keep the interest in this social dimension and considering how people attach meaning and to things, and I'm really interested in this subjective dimension of designing and using stuff.
At CMU, I run a PhD program in transition design. We're thinking about futures. We think about systems level change, and with a particular view on social and ecological justice, and it's of course a program that is situated in a design school, so we always have design at the heart of everything. But I also teach at the master's level. I run a seminar on how we think and how we think, which is actually more interesting than how we think. Anyway, so I run that. And then I also teach an undergraduate studio in industrial design, where I have there's a class of usually about 16 or 17 extremely brilliant people who are all trying to figure out how we can design stuff that lasts, that sells well, that's cool, that's interesting, but it also can be repaired and maintained, ages beautifully. People can form stories with those objects, and that they don't wreak social and ecological devastation in the process, So it's a kind of a good thing for a 21 or 22-year-old to be thinking about, I think. So...
there's something, I have a question, because earlier I was reading again through lifespan of products and so forth, and I know people, maybe myself a bit, I have so many products that I actually store forever and never use again, and I think that is maybe even worse than throwing them away, because when you store them, it's not even prime material for anything else. And maybe fashion should be something that disappears after 2 years or maybe a year, because who wants to wear the same clothes for several years,
Yeah, I agree that material durability for some kinds of products is a problem, right? If you want to replace it, it's better if we could manage to deal with these residues. But I also think that sometimes we keep things because they have a value for us in some level. So not necessarily it's a problem. I think it's something that we need to further investigate. And I think that that that's what really interested me in my research, to understand why people keep and why people throw away. And sometimes I'm not necessarily, I think keeping them without using them or out of our sight is necessarily a bad thing, because some artifacts are there to give us some kind of, emotional comfort or security. So I think there's many reasons for us to do such things. But I was interested about what Jonathan was saying regarding this work with companies and enterprises, because I have more contact with researchers that focus on consumers and users concerning my interests, and it seems to me there might be some contradictions and things that are difficult to deal with when we start thinking about these other stakeholders and how to make durable things that work for all of them.
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are contradictions, aren't there? Because they're like a large company, a global corporation, if you like, which is just, whether it likes it or not, is entangled in systems such as capitalism, which itself relies on certain types of extraction in order to operate. People say capitalism is broken, right? But actually it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, but it does break things whilst it does that. And it's interesting to me, because I feel like I sometimes have a bit of a double life, where we're in the studio at university or whatever, and we're talking about what ought to happen, and we're really digging deep into the sort of ethos of the work and how it might be different. And then you've got, on the other hand, say a company who makes something like a type of product, and it's almost like, from the outside, you look at this company and you just think, this company is creating so much waste or so much pollution, or they're responsible for this and that. And on some level that's true, but then what happens is you get invited in to talk to the company about how they can be better, because they want to be better. And so you go in, and then what you quickly find is it's not really a company. It's like it's 1,000 people. And all those people are there because they want to do meaningful work, and they want to, and they want to matter, and they want to help, and they want to do stuff. And so there's one of the things that's happened to me over the last, 15, 20 years or whatever, is that I have to I try to remind myself that, sure, there's a brand and there is an external perspective of the brand, but behind that, there's usually thousands of people with mortgages, with families, with concerns, with struggles. And so every team I'm fortunate enough to work with, I feel like a sort of faith gets restored, in the future, when you meet the humans and the people within these systems. Just like I'm a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and there's the external perspective of that university. But then there's also just a load of people who work there who have their own take on the world. But there is definitely a tension. But one of the things that surprises me most about emotionally durable design is that it initially sounds like a paradox, so you're suggesting that a company designs things that last, therefore they're going to sell less stuff, right? And I think that's one of the things that that creates almost like the biggest barrier to engagement for a lot of companies. It sounds like the opposite of economic success, but actually what we'll find is when you look across the economy as a whole, like let's just say we look at the US, and when you look at the economy as a whole, what you might find is that there's a certain throughput of materials and products, but this is distributed across thousands of companies. And what I think there's another story where we say, well, okay, really it's about market share and how a particular company can increase the likelihood of a customer kind of staying with them, and how might that happen. So with Puma, for example, the sports brand, one of the things that I worked with them quite a few years ago back in the UK, when I was in the UK, and initially there was concern, like, so what, we're going to design sneakers that last longer? Doesn't that mean we're going to sell less sneakers? And the argument is actually, no, it's the opposite. What happens is you create a product that can be maintained and updated and repaired, and therefore customers develop a kind of richer experience, and they form more stories around these objects, so that when it is time to replace, the customer is more likely to replace them with Puma rather than going across the road and replacing them with Nike or something like that. And so that's not, on a personal level, me, the human being, I don't really care too much about, which brand sells which product to which person. That's not, I don't wake up in the morning thinking about things like that. But I do know that people who work in these organizations are concerned about those kinds of things. And so what I've always tried to do is connect this sort of sustainability agenda with how do we get people to consume less stuff, basically. And how do you then present that to a company in such a way that they can see that that could be part of economic success. So it's almost like marrying together these, what seem like opposing goals, but actually I wonder whether they might be more similar than we tend to think.
Yeah, I think there's so little examples of people who live with few things that are really attractive for most of the people. As an influencer, right? An influencer that would always go for more and more stuff and more products in your daily life than rather than less. Claudia, do you have an example of emotional durable design in Brazil? Your favorite one?
I was just trying to remember some examples considering the strategies that I was able to map during my research. And I started to think about some capstone projects that my students presented here. And one of them, I think it's really interesting to think about materials and this issue of durability that you're raising. And so they developed jewelry line that was composed by a part that was not durable, that was made of organic material that would rapidly degrades, and a part that was durable. And there was a poetic in this project to talk about human relations and how memories are connected to this type of product, because jewelry is sometimes something that goes from one generation to another. So there was a reflection about what is lost and what is kept. So I think it's a beautiful project. And there was another example of some students that developed a cover for leg prosthetics, and the idea is that that cover could be personalized considering the size and the general shape and things like that. So it would be digitally produced, but also it was designed in a way that people could feel more interested in or incited to interfere in the materiality of the product, so make different prints or attach things in order to better align the product aesthetics to their personality. So it's in between personalization and customization, I think. And considering more well-known examples here from Brazil, I was thinking about the work of Campana brothers. I think they are one of the most internationally known designers from Brazil. And in their work, there's something really interesting that is kind of mixing industrial production with craftsmanships, so handmade details. And they usually work with communities of craftsmen and craftswomen who collaborate in developing these products that highly resonate with our culture culture. So I think that maybe trying to adapt products that are mass produced with this local specificities is something that might be interesting too, in the sense of creating this identification or this effective attachment.
How much does money play a role? When I listen to you and I hear that it's craft, for example, employed in the production of the products, that definitely is something that is more expensive. And do people get easier attached to products that were more expensive? How much does this play a role?
Well, I think there's the dimension of status for sure. So this influences the way that people feel about things. And of course, they are expensive products, so it's not accessible to anyone, to everyone, I mean. But I think that's this barrier to think about how we could make this strategy more accessible. But there's also something that, considering this articulation with local communities, I think that their work, because of these statues and because it's very famous, sometimes directs the attention for these communities and the products they are making by themselves. And, they tend to be more accessible. So I think there's a general sense of valuing our craft and our culture that is kind of communicated and by their products and their production and this act itself. But sure, the price of things is something important to take in consideration, and maybe the attachment of people who actually can afford them is also connected with this issue of statues, and something we need to consider for sure.
Yeah, it clashes a little bit with social dimensions, right? Where something expensive, then it's not available for everyone, and so
and there's also a lot of discussion here in Brazil concerning this type of collaboration, because not always the communities that are part of these relations are being fairly paid. And in general, famous designers and companies who are producing get more of this income. So there's a lot of discussion here about that. It's also something really important to consider, the social dimension for sure.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? That these kind of collaborative projects can just sometimes be a different form of extraction, like a different form of exploitation. And it's yeah. I mean, I would love to just respond as well to Inken's question about money. Does cost play a part? And it's interesting how, I do quite a lot of research the last few years, inviting people to talk about the things they own, like their possessions that matter the most, matter to them the most. And it's quite rare for someone to bring something to a session like that that is worth a lot of money, or the reason it's valuable is because it's worth a lot of money. Like let's say if I see 100 objects from 100 people, maybe like 2 of them will be because of that. But almost every single time, the object holds this power or this significance because a person's own life story is somehow woven into this thing. And actually, place is a common part of that, culture and place. So for example, like if you took all of the object handling sessions I've done, and the thousands of objects I've seen through that, you could basically sum it up in 3 ways. So these significant objects basically connect you to another person or people, another place, or another time in your life. So it's like the object's almost like a doorway into a memory or an experience or a set of experiences. So we see this a lot with gifts or with heirloom objects that were passed down, or we see a lot of objects that were present when something quite significant took place. And, so the object almost becomes like a prop in a story, like it was there. And so like a lot of the things that people really cherish and hold on to, sometimes they help hold a particular story in place about your life that is important to you and that matters. And people feel this way about places as well, like a certain tree in a certain park, or a certain cafe in a certain city, or it's really fascinating to me that not the things that matter to people, but the stories about why that matters so much, and it has virtually nothing to do with the economic value of the product. It's other types of value. And then this other thing happened a few years ago in my research, which was really surprising, but it's changed a lot for me, which is one of this kind of meaning. It's about meaning, isn't it? It's like this meaningful association that forms around this product or this place. And but that can also be really negative as well. Like something bad can happen. Like a classic example is a photograph that maybe is of someone you used to be close friends with, and then they betrayed you really badly. And now the meaning of this photograph has completely transformed. So it's still really meaningful. It's really powerful, but it's almost like a negative story. And it's not a story I want to be around anymore. I'd like to sort of edit that out if I could. And so it's one reason why we create distance from certain material things, is they almost like become toxic or sort of contaminated with stories that we don't want to be around anymore. So this isn't all of it, but it's part of it, that idea of proximity and like, what do we want to surround ourselves with? And Claudia, you mentioned earlier about identity, and when we hold on to things, even if we don't really use them anymore, it somehow assembles this world around us that we feel like we belong to. And then we edit that collection of things to remove things that maybe we sort of would rather forget or we don't want to belong to anymore.
Yeah, I think it's nice because I also do this exercise with my students, because I often teach a course on design and emotion for undergraduate students. So I ask them to bring something valuable to them, using that idea that, well, if your house is on fire, which things will you prioritize on saving? And I was trying to connect the stories that I heard from them with my research, doing my master's, and I found it was quite curious that more recently I started receiving more and more students that brought mobile phones as valuable items. And I thought that maybe they forgot to select something at home prior to the class and just used something that they had in hands. Yeah, it's an hypothesis. But when they present the reasons why they are showing that object, they usually use very pragmatic explanations, beginning with, well, if my house is on fire, I can use the mobile to call the fireman. But also, they think about the relations that this product may make them access. For instance, there's where they can see the photographs and videos of their loved ones. So it's kind of a contemporary photo album. But something that caught my attention is that during my research back in 2008, 2009, there were some people that really showed me love for their mobile phones concerning their appearance, their style. They think that it matched their personalities and their personal style. And nowadays I don't hear that. And I think that it has to do with the design of these products, because they have become very standard. They are basically black boxes now. And what we now call dumb phones, back then they had a much larger range of aesthetic configurations. So nowadays, smartphones might be less prone maybe to fashion dynamics, for instance, but they also might build weaker affective relationship with users because of this standardization. Of course, these products are very subject to planned obsolescence, and that's another problem, but these examples made me think about how the materiality of the object and this aesthetic dimension is important too. And I also wanted to hear more from you, Jonathan, about how design could possibly or not interfere in these dynamics that are extremely personal, right? It depends on the relations that I build along my life. And what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I also see that same pattern with the smartphone as a piece of plastic and metal is not really the focus anymore of the attachment, but it's the services and the memories that are somehow accessed through that, right? And whereas, as you say, back in the early 2000s, the phone with its little black and white screen and physical buttons didn't really connect you to too much data. It didn't connect you to your photo albums and memories in the same way. So there was more emphasis on the physical product itself, I guess. Yeah, and I see that same transition. But I think in terms of how design can intervene, I think it's almost like, for me, the most the form of design best placed to intervene with this is interaction design. So when I say interaction design, I don't just mean, UI, UX, designing screens and organizing that flow of experience. I also mean, because industrial design is interaction design. Architecture is interaction design. Like all design is interaction design, right? It's like how we encounter the world. And so I think interaction designers understand very well that there is like designers kind of choreograph experience, right, throughout the life of the product. And historically, that choreography has placed a huge amount of emphasis on the point of purchase. Like, what will it take to get someone to buy this thing? And then they can have it, and then we'll focus on them buying something else, and it's all about beginnings, and how we can begin a relationship, and then what happens after that is nothing. And so I think it's about creating events after the purchase. So it's almost kind of like, how do you maintain and care for this product? Is there a ritual process there? What's the experience of that? How does the experience of maintaining this product enrich the process? Are there moments where you upgrade or customize it? And what is the experience of that? How does this product age? And what is the experience of that? So it's all this kind of like creating opportunities for experience to take place. And we could say that if you don't think about those things, experience will still take place, but it will probably be a negative experience, which removes value. It kind of strips value away. And so I've written, as you know, I've like written a few books in my career, and in my most recent book, which is called Meaningful Stuff, I proposed this idea of a design philosophy of experience-heavy, material light. So it's just this 4 words, experience-heavy, material light. And so really, I guess what we're trying to do is say, well, what would it take to sort of choreograph a product's life so that there are these really rich opportunities for experience to happen? And how can we do that using as little material as possible? By following circular design principles or thinking about the longevity of material and so on. And my argument, I guess, is that the dominant design and production system today is the opposite of that. It's experience light, material heavy. So we kind of produce these pathetically shallow experiences that last a fleeting handful of seconds, but we consume ridiculous amounts of physical resources and human resources and devastate entire communities and worlds in order to produce this stupid object that does something so stupid and pathetic that we're sort of, and so I feel like experience heavy material light is not a bad thing to hold in mind if you're thinking of getting into the product design or industrial design business, because that's kind of one way to increase the likelihood of your work mattering to someone. And if it doesn't matter to someone, why would they be motivated to repair it or look after it or keep it well or give it to someone else when they don't want it anymore? Why would they bother to do that?
It's like they don't have any satisfaction, right? When satisfaction comes when you repair something and you feel satisfied through the action. I mean, that's something that has value to people.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And it's interesting, I'll just say it, I'm a cisgendered white British man, English is my first language, and I kind of walk through the world in a certain way and I see the world in a certain way. And for me, I come from a society where in 2025, if you repair something, you're almost like it's almost like a sign of protest, like, whoa, you are like really, it's quite, almost feels political to repair something these days. It's bizarre. And yet I know that's from an Anglo-European worldview, right? Which is sort of where repair tends not to happen. And we have a certain story about what that repair means. But it's certainly true. And that's why I'm really interested in this conversation, which brings together different worldviews and perspectives on this, because, but it is true from my perspective that when repair takes place, yes, we're repairing objects, but we're also kind of repairing ourselves. We're sort of like building a sense of competency and reconnecting with the world a little bit. A world that we haven't really felt a part of, because it was, we're just passive consumers of products. We pay for stuff, we press buttons, and that's about it. And it's a really depressing, degrading sort of experience. So repair almost like invites us back in to a world of materials and making, customization, and it's quite transformational in some respects.
Yep, but it's also because we feel lost maybe without things, right? There's something when you spoke about your smartphones, Claudia, that's the thing they would take, because maybe they feel reinsured with a smartphone. They can have so many things here, so many memories. It's optimizing. If you take one thing, that would optimize this task really. But what is that we always feel lost if we give away our things, if we let go? And so the relation to things is not superficial. Somehow we need all this stuff, and it's something very central to the human condition, is it not?
Yeah, I think in several levels, because they act as mediators between other people. They also help us form our own identities in different levels and considering different aspects, gender, class, culture. So artifacts are essential to these processes. So I think it's not a question to demonize consumption or think that we can get rid of stuff. Maybe we can do well with less, but nevertheless, this material dimension of life is crucial. The last thing that you both said also made me think about the importance of time within these processes, because Inken said something about optimizing our tasks concerning the mobile phone. So, you're also talking about how repairing things demands a certain disposition, and I think it demands also some time. And maybe we need that time to stop and look at our stuff and to interact with them in a different way. And also, I think we need to think about how to design stuff that people feel able to interact with, in the sense that they feel able and willing to interfere and open and repair, actually, because I think that sometimes people are quite insecure to do that because they actually don't know how to start and what resources they need. And actually, a great part of what we design and produce is not made to make that accessible. We were talking about the phones that are kind of black boxes. We don't know how to start. So I think us designers might also work in the sense of getting people feel more confident and willing to interact with products in that way, right? And take the time to do that, which is something difficult nowadays too, but I think it's important.
But the time, I mean, the period we're living in plays a big role. I mean, when I was young in the 70s, it was not cool to wear something new, So, we had to make things old before you could actually go out with them on the street. And I see that now in the young generation, there's something similar happening again, and not in all of them, and not in all countries, and particularly in Berlin, for example. And when I'm in Berlin, this really is a city where there are these tendencies of the reuse of things, and that really is something important. You show that you're part of the Berlin story when you reuse or interpret spaces even, without changing it, like just taking it as it is and putting different layers on it. And, this kind of design, which is allowing stories to be visible. For example, I remember this restaurant, which was at some point Chinese, and then it was Bavarian, and it was all in eastern part of Germany. And actually all the layers were still there. And when you walked in, you didn't really know, what is this place? What is it now? But most interesting. And you just see it, you look at it, and you understand a lot of things about what happened in this place. And it's not just the present moment, but it's much more. So I think design, because they're designers, a creative person, so much linked to tendencies and to what people really need, and the use of things, that they're great to influence, let's say in a positive way, new scenarios, allowing emotions and allowing what we really need, because we need to have solid experiences. We need to have something to grab on in our lives, right? We can't just say nothing is important, I believe.
Exactly. I think in industry, and I don't know what you're seeing, Claudia, in your work, but what I'm seeing is this accelerationist mindset where designers are, it's almost like there's this dominant agenda that everything has to be quick and easy to use, and that no one cares, and the world is speeding up, and everything's about AI, And it is true that all those things are true. Actually, the world isn't speeding up. The world is actually rotating and happening at pretty much the same speed it has for millions of years. But our experience in the number of things we try and do in the time we have every time the Earth rotates, which is a cycle, I think we're cramming a lot more in than we used to do. So our feeling is like things are speeding up. But one of the things I think design has unfortunately allowed is we believe that our products need to be fast and easy to use. And when something requires maintenance, or it requires an update or something like that, it's described as a pain point, like something is wrong. Our user for a brief moment noticed that they're using the product. We need to fix that. It's not fully autonomous. It's not fully. And so I'm starting to notice that a little bit out in design. And one of the great things about, teaching industrial design, certainly at Carnegie Mellon, is we actually see design as an opportunity to reintroduce some of the poetry into everyday life, which I think design has accidentally engineered out. in the name of speed and convenience, this ridiculous assumption that our job as designers is to be usability engineers, which is just to make the world quicker and easier to use. Imagine if you were a novelist and you thought your job as a novelist was to write books that are just really quick and easy to get through. It's sort of like, it's just utterly bizarre. And yet in design, we're being lured into that reality. And I think we have to sort of step back and be like, hang on, that's a really infantile, ridiculous view of the world to think that that's what's actually happening.
It's true. Humans are lazy. I mean, I think that is also a fundamental condition. So everything that makes life easier seems something that is good, but it's not, because lazy is just to preserve ourselves, but we can make an effort and construct ourselves through effort. We forget that, no? But I also think that there are lots of examples in everyday life. Like, I bet after this call, within 15-20 minutes, I'll see an example of someone doing something the harder way because they're just really interested in that, or they're really motivated to do that. Like if you're booking a restaurant for an anniversary dinner, if all we are is lazy and we just want the quick, easy way, we would all just book anniversary dinners at McDonald's because it's fast and easy. But we all know that that's not what we do. Or we would invite someone around for dinner and we'd say, how many are coming? That's like 5 people coming. Okay, so that's 5 frozen microwave shepherd's pies that I need then. We just know. We know that that's not what we do. Or why would we have plants in our house? Because they're slow and difficult. Why would we own a dog ever? Because it's massively inconvenient and difficult. You know what I mean? So I just think there are so many examples in our lives of things that are slow and difficult sometimes, but we know why we do it, because it's absolutely worth it. And if we're going to talk about meaning and experience and the richness of everyday life, those slow, difficult things are usually where that happens. And so we have to be really careful we don't just edit all of that out because of this mythology that we have to make the world quick and easy to use. Yes, absolutely. Wow. This conversation, I think it's encouraging. I come out of it with new energy. You feel like we can do things, and it's in our hands. And as a designer as well, or not designer, whatever it is, but living our life in a certain sense with values is so important. So, thank you very much. That was a great tea time, and thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. Thanks.
Dear audience, this has been one episode of our podcast series T.time on Design for Sustainability. Follow us and subscribe for more episodes on your favorite podcast platform. You'll find all announcements on social media. Use T-time in your search engine.